an aggressor broke into their home and bludgeoned to death the mother and father and 13-year-old son and took the 9-year-old and 7-year-old and abducted them for a period of time.
Hey gang, Palm Peace of Mind Industries is the OC of choice for the active self-protection team. We love their mission and the efficacy of their product. We love the flip-top reversible clips. We love everything about them. They have removed any excuse to not carry OC. OC will solve far more problems than a firearm ever will, and I wouldn't leave the house without it. I just bought one for my daughter, and I have a good friend who used it successfully in a real-life defensive encounter. Get one at get-asp.com/palm. Get-asp.com/palm. Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, your favorite, friendly former Fed. With me today, our owner and founder, John Correa, who is now smiling for the first time in a while. We're just at the tail end of the ASP National Conference.
And it was legit. We had a great time. I am whooped and I have no voice left.
Yeah, so we're going to make this pretty quick. I appreciate John taking the time. This episode, this special edition, is about women in self-defense, taking agency over their own protection, knowing that there's no one there to save them necessarily, and they're going to have to take care of themselves and handle the situation. We have three amazing women in this episode. Carrie Dudenhofer from Washington State. After a terrible crime in their community, she took agency over her family's protection. Lisa Ludwig in New York, who's just an absolute phenom, took it upon herself to start her own, self-defense classes and become an instructor after a spike in crime. And Wendy Hoffman in San Diego, who, and John knows all three of these ladies. Wendy's doing the Lord's work, getting CCW carry permits to people in San Diego, whereas before the sheriff was, he ruled by fiat and said, no, I'll decide who gets them and who doesn't, based on nothing. John, talk to me about these ladies real quick and your experience with them.
Well, three of the most powerful women in the firearms and self-defense community who I am super proud to know every single one of them. And I think they exemplify the best of us. And not only that, they are incredibly competent in self-defense, incredibly competent with firearms, incredibly competent instructors, and also upstanding humans. And, they exemplify good, sane, sober, moral, prudent people. And I'm just proud to associate with them and proud to bring their story.
This weekend, it was funny. Like I said, we're at the national conference, and I stopped noticing female shooters and female instructors. It stopped being novel. It's just what is now. And around the active self-protection culture is what I think there's 40% of the employees are female here.
I think almost 50% at this point of active self-protection. I think 45% are female. We had about a little right at a third of attendees at the national conference this year were women. Most of those didn't come with their husbands. We had several excellent instructors who happened to be women, and we try real hard not to pigeonhole. We have female instructors. No, we have instructors,
right.
And some of them are women.
Yeah, and everyone did a phenomenal job and came together to raise quite a bit of money for the Flint Hills Foster Teen Camp, which is exciting, really exciting. We had a great time. And folks, I would encourage you, if you're interested in training with us, please sign up as soon as you can for next year's national conference. It is an absolute blast. John, thanks for being here.
Really excited for this episode, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Okay, gang, with us on the line is my friend, Wendy Hoffman from San Diego. She is married with two kids, ages 2 and 5. She's an NRA certified instructor. She is a certified instructor for the Well-Armed Woman, the CEO of the San Diego County Gun Owners Association, and a program director for Not Me California. But other than that, she doesn't have a lot going on. Wendy, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. We're talking to female self-defenders about the unique space that you guys occupy. That's a little bit different than male self-defenders. And we're all excited to see that this is growing. I think it's growing exponentially, the number of women in the industry instructing and the number of women taking agency over their own self-protection, knowing that, there's not always going to be someone around. Sometimes it's just me and I have to be my own protection. What got you started interested in taking care of your own self-protection?
Well, honestly, my story, unfortunately, is not that unique. I went through a really bad breakup, and the ex was borderline stalking me. And one of my friends got me into shooting. So I started going to the range on a regular basis. I bought my first gun on my own and really fell in love with it and just kept going from there.
When you first started out going with your friend to the range and learning about guns, did you get any bad advice or any sort of advice that only a man would give a woman, let's say?
That happens all the time.
Uh-huh.
I've been an instructor for many, many years now, and it still happens. So yeah, I definitely have had many incidents where men have given me bad advice. It's typically very well-meaning, but there's just a very different environment for women to learn than men. Not just learning, but also the physicality of it. Oh, just grip it tighter, or oh, just pull harder to rack the slide. That seems like great advice coming from a guy, but if your hand strength or your body type is just not there, then you can't really fix that. So that's how I got into instructing, is because there just wasn't a lot of resources for women to learn how to shoot from women.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that, women can learn from men, men can learn from women, but there is a unique set of, like you said, physicality is just one of the things that are different. What brings you to wanting to defend yourself is frequently different for a woman than it is for a man. So
Absolutely.
how about gun buying advice? Did anyone tell you, oh, sweetheart, get you a little 22, revolver or whatever? Does that actually happen to you?
I don't really recall it happening to me directly, because I did have somebody from the very beginning who was a very good mentor. There were hints of it at the gun shops from the clerks, but typically I had some advice going into it. But from my experience as an instructor, I hear that bad advice all the time. The one that sticks out to me was this couple. They had gone to a gun store with one of their friends. They believed that he would be a really good source of information because he was a retired law enforcement officer. No offense, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy, he probably had a limited experience of what he was used to, and he didn't really know how to come at it from the angle of somebody who had smaller hands or weaker hands or a different body type. And so this couple and their friend spent several hours in this gun shop talking about all the different types of guns, and normally I would say that's a really good place to start, where you explore different types and, a semi-auto versus a revolver versus the different sizes, a large one versus a small one, different calibers, all that stuff. But the thing is, they didn't try the gun before they bought it. That's not always possible. I understand that. But the way that it fit in this lady's hand, it didn't work for her at all. There was just the way that the trigger guard sat on the grip of the gun. There was this little space in there that her knuckle would just get wedged into. And every time she shot this gun, it just ground against the knuckle of her finger, and it was painful. So, she invested so much time and quite a bit of money for her to buy this gun that she hated, because this person that helped her just didn't know about the things to look at, from a woman's perspective.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that, because as a retired law enforcement officer and an instructor for law enforcement, being in the active self-protection instructor development class with you, I learned, as Donald Rumsfeld once said, there are unknown unknowns. I didn't know what I didn't know, and that's probably the biggest thing for me, not so much relating to instructing females or whatever, just all the things that never came up as a law enforcement instructor that are going to come up. I'm so glad that I was able to take this class. Just an ad for the class, by the way. So glad I could take this class before I ever started, so I have a leg up to not thinking that I know what I'm doing, because I would not have known what I was doing. So that was really, really interesting. And I think, yeah, like you said, I think most of the folks that are giving out bad advice are certainly have their hearts in the right place. They want, even the sort of mildly unaware misogynist guy who's patting you on the head and telling you you're 22. He's not saying that because he thinks you're an idiot. That's what he thinks is, going to help. That's what he thinks it's going to be helpful. So God bless him. But hopefully shows like this and talking to people like you will help us to dispel and disabuse people of some of these notions that they have. So I used to live where you live in San Diego County. Beautiful place, wonderful weather. Used to be a little bit more purple, than blue or red. And Now it's certainly gone more blue. We love our Democrat voters. God bless you. We want you to listen to our show, but the way things had been going in San Diego over the last, I'd say, 20 years or so, since when I moved there in '96, it was a pretty liberal, CCW policy. Most people, if they needed a reason, so it wasn't shall issue, but most people, if they had an honest, reason, and again, not that I think you should need one, to carry a firearm, they would get a permit. It wasn't a big deal. And then I had a friend who had one for decades. And then a certain sheriff got elected, and the next time he reapplied, it was turned down. And it was turned down because we just don't think you have a good enough reason. This guy owned a restaurant. He's making huge cash deposits. So if anybody had a reason, and I say that in air quotes, a reason to have a CCW, he did. And they just kept making it harder and harder and harder for him to re-up. So you, through the San Diego County Gun Owners Association, are doing some phenomenal work out there. Do you want to tell us what's going on legally out there in San Diego?
Well, we did have a really big success turning around the CCW policy about 5 years ago. So you were saying Sheriff Gore, he changed the CCW policy when he went into office, and he made it very, very restrictive. So at one point we had about 1,000 permits in the entire county of San Diego.
How many people is that?
And for those of you who don't know, we're just over 3 million. So I think right now 3.4 million, somewhere in that range. And we had just about 1,000 permits. So we placed a lot of political pressure on Sheriff Gore when we formed the organization. We went after his donors, told them about the truth about the policy is that he was the one who didn't want to issue. We held up his endorsements. We talked to the media about it. Because one of the things that he did was blamed it on a lawsuit that was pending. So there was a gentleman who wanted a permit, couldn't get one, and he sued the sheriff. And this case was in court for a very long time, like 7-8 years. And so he kept trying to say, well, I'm just waiting for the courts to tell me what I should do. Well, Sheriff Gore actually ended up winning that case. He actually had the authority to decide what he wanted the policy to be. And that's what the courts told him. But we shared with everybody in the media and in political circles that he had the ability to change the policy whenever he wanted. And that included making it less restrictive. Mm-hmm. So eventually he did end up rewriting his policy. So you do still need a reason, you still need good cause, but it is very, very possible. We are seeing almost no denials based on good cause at this point. So basically, if you write something down about why you think you need one, that at least that part of the application will get approved, which is very, very cool. We're about 5,000 permits right now over the last couple of years, and they're pumping out 150 a month, somewhere in that range. But it's just a really good example of how political pressure works and how important it is to create political change at the local level. A lot of people disregard county and city level politics, but it does matter.
Yeah, clearly. You demonstrated that clearly. If I move back, I mean, I get to carry a gun because I'm retired law enforcement, but if I move back or somebody in San Diego is listening to this, for a reason why you need to carry a firearm, could you just say, I live in El Cajon? Would that be sufficient, do you think? Just kidding, El Cajon peeps. I love you.
You would have to describe it a little bit more,
okay.
But we've had very similar good causes. You know, I live in a rough neighborhood. I have to park on the street and walk past, criminals that are hanging out on the sidewalk, stuff like that. It's pretty easy.
Get creative, people. I mean,
yep.
As far as we're concerned, the Second Amendment is your permit to carry a concealed weapon, but California doesn't recognize that. They don't recognize the Second Amendment like the way we do.
I know.
So, Wendy, going forward with your work there, and you're doing the Lord's work, I was unaware of this change until I met you and you told me about it. It's very exciting stuff to go from 1,000 to 5,000. Moving forward, is there any litigation or anything you guys are trying to do to push towards more of a shall issue environment in San Diego, or is that not realistic?
So we're super close to being shall issue in San Diego. So there's no pending litigation there, but my organization, San Diego County Gun Owners, we're involved in several lawsuits. I myself am a plaintiff in the Miller case, which is the assault weapons ban lawsuit. San Diego County Gun Owners is a plaintiff in the 1 in 30 day lawsuit, the lawsuit against banning individuals ages 18 to 20 from owning guns, and the roster lawsuit. So we're working really hard to bring back the Second Amendment to California and particularly San Diego.
Great stuff. So if people want to train with you or get you online, where would they find you?
Well, our organization is San Diego County Gun Owners.com. I personally don't train that much right now. I'm not doing a lot of instructing because I work full time for STCGO.
Mm-hmm.
But I also would encourage all the ladies to check out our women's mentorship program. It's called Not Me SD. And we have a couple of chapters throughout the throughout the state. But the San Diego one is called Not Me SD. And you can find that at notmesd.org. And it's just a really cool, free mentorship program to help women feel more comfortable exploring gun ownership. We've helped just about 500 women on their journey to purchasing and selecting a firearm, finding training that is appropriate for where they're at and what they're looking for, and also getting their CCWs. And we were actually just featured in the Wall Street Journal. So
wow,
cool.
That's great. I mean, you're moving up media-wise, first the Journal, then the ASP podcast. I mean, who knows what's next? Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Take care. And with us on the line now, my friend, Lisa Ludwig. She's a fellow in the Active Self-Protection Instructor course, fellow cohort member, and new best friend. She is the president at She Trains You Incorporated. You can find them at shetrainsyou.com. She is the president and founder of the Long Island Women's Firearms Club. She is a certified trainer and lead chapter facilitator for Girl in a Gun National Shooting League. She is an NRA Chief Range Safety Officer, certified in pistol and rifle instruction, and she is a regional trainer for the Concealed Coalition of Metro New York. Lisa, how are you?
Good. Thanks, Mike, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
It's my pleasure. And you are happily married, and you live in Long Island, New York.
I am to both of those questions. Yes, thank you.
Very welcome. I'm not sure if I say congratulations on the living in New York part, but you're doing your best to make things better out there, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm behind enemy lines, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm one of not so many.
Yeah. Lisa, tell the folks listening, you weren't always a gun person. You weren't always a self-defense oriented person. So what is it that got you interested in taking agency over your own self-protection initially?
Good question. Well, originally I was a martial artist at like 12 years old, but I didn't really think that, this would turn into what it is today. But flash forward to 9/11 and, I saw the smoke from the towers and it kind of scared me because I thought what was happening now, pandemic wise, was going to happen then, where everybody was kind of just bugging out and, getting all the food and, whatever they can grab. So I did. And I thought, someone can come right in here and take all my stuff. So, what is all this worth? So I said, I have to go get, some kind of training. So I went to my closest military guy, of course. And I said, what do I do? And he was like, go get a Remington, 12 gauge, 870 tactical, and meet me at Calverton, which is basically the end of Long Island, in like a sand pit. So we shot 5 times. I hit 0. I went home. I put a sock over the muzzle and I left it there for 2 years because I was petrified. He didn't really show me what I really needed to know. He kind of loaded it for me. I'm a girl. I know I'm a girl, but it doesn't mean I can't do it. Flash forward to when I got my house about 7 years ago. There was a lot of riffraff around my house, so I couldn't walk out with my Remington shotgun, as much as I really wanted to. So I said, I have to go get a handgun. So I filled out the application. I got my Sportsman, which is not a concealed, just a regular, to the range, to the gun store kind of thing, and hunting. And I got it. It took about 8 months, and this was pre-pandemic. And then I wound up seeing a violent break-in in my neighborhood, which the Ring camera notified me as on the app saying, one of your neighbors, is having an issue, and it sent the video. And it was basically a lady running into her house, slamming the door, locking it, and then a guy running behind her with a full mask on and a 9mm in his hand. And he was donkey kicking the door. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, this is crazy. What happens if that door would have flung open? What would that lady have done? She would have thrown a book at him. You know, like the police would have never came in time, and nothing against the police, but they're not miracle workers. You know, that was the end of that video. And I was in the West Babylon neighborhood watch group, just a local neighborhood watch group I'm in. And I said, does anybody want to learn firearms? And next thing you know, all these women were like, me. And I was like, whoa, I'm onto something here. So I went to my local training counselor and started getting my certifications, my insurance, and getting set up to open my women's club. When we first started, we blew up like right away, between like 30 or 40 women, which is a lot, especially for me, just being the only instructor and, no one being RSOs. So I had to quickly, get my team in order, get them trained. And now we're 3 years forward and we're about 70, 80 members strong, and we ebb and flow. We really can't handle too many more than that because, it gets unsafe. And after that, it starts becoming like sheep. So I don't want to lose, our focus, being a self-defense home club, so it's great. And after that, I started the shooting league here for A Girl and a Gun as like a supplement to our nights, just another additional range night. It was great.
That's all awesome, by the way. And I think people who don't live in New York or don't know about the conditions, especially in the New York City area, roughly, don't understand what a miracle story this is for you to get this done. You kind of brush past all the stuff you had to do to get set up, but I'm sure it was a bureaucratic nightmare in more ways than one. Could you talk to us real quick about some of the things you've experienced being, first of all, you talked about the guy that trained you, the military guy, and I said the same thing to another one of the guests on this show. I think these people, usually men, I think they mean well. They're not. They're trying to help. They have all the best intentions, but they do things like tell you to buy a shotgun, have you fire 5 rounds, and call it good. And that's not good. That's not nearly enough. That's just not even getting started as far as training goes. At any point, have you experienced anything, any sort of pat you on the head, sweetheart, kind of mentality from anyone at a gun store or a range or whatever who kind of condescended to you? And if so, how did you deal with that?
I actually do get it more often than not, unfortunately, because not only am I a woman, I'm a lesbian woman. And when I say I'm a lesbian woman, I'm a butch lesbian woman. So when they see me, I guess I'm intimidating, or I don't know. I try to be very humble and sweet and smiley, but, men do feel the need to sometimes, be a little condescending. I did have a guy come in. I was training a woman for her first time on a handgun, and his response as soon as he saw us was, "You're not going to shoot me, are you?" And I was like, not if you want me to.
What a strange thing to say.
And then when he left, he backed out of the range going, "Well, thank you for not shooting me today." And I was like, okay. It was really weird and condescending. And even the lady that was training, she was like, that was weird. Yeah. And I was like, I know, it totally was.
That stands out as the weirdest story I've heard yet, as a matter of fact. I've heard quite a few stories.
Yeah. Oh, and I had another guy just recently at an event, and he was asking me what I do. I was there as a range safety officer. I was just volunteering at a local event. And I said, I'm a full-time firearms instructor. And he's like, but so what do you do Monday morning? I'm like, Monday morning, I train people. And he's like, really? He just couldn't get it that I'm full-time and I'm a woman and this is all I do. Just didn't get it. I guess it blew his mind. I don't know. That's
crazy. Yeah. He's like, well, I mean, obviously you must be a teacher or a secretary or a nurse full-time, and you just do this for fun on the weekends. And that's, and that's part of the reason we're doing shows like this, is to kind of break that stigma that women can't be their own self-protection, A, and B, they currently couldn't be an instructor. I've learned more from people like you and Carrie Dudenhofer and Wendy than I have in a long time. And to see you guys, so people at home understand what I'm talking about, we had an in-person conference for this instructor development course, and I got to see these ladies instruct. And in my career, in 30 years in law enforcement, I had one female firearms instructor that entire time. who was junior to me, and she was awesome, and she could come alongside shooters and do things in a way that a man can't. How do you feel the state of the Second Amendment in New York is going? Is it getting better or is it getting worse?
Oh God, it's getting worse, I feel. It's like every turn, it's like, there's a new regulation or a new law or something got overturned. It's very hard to keep up on these laws that is a real qualified reference. Instead of like word of mouth from everybody all the time, it's very hard to find like, okay, this is what happened, 100%, and it's very hard to find that information. So everybody's kind of running around here like bugging out because they know that the police have a different outlook now, and it's nothing against them. If I was a cop, I would be the same way. If you're going to hold me liable, to help you, then I'm not going to help you.
Right.
Simple.
Yeah.
But the point is it's changed. It's not grandpa's generation anymore. So, these women now I get calls all day long, like, Lisa, what do I do? How do I get into one of your classes, or what kind of gun do I buy, or, just anything all day long, and it's like, I feel bad for these women because they're really if they didn't come to me, they were going to get taken advantage of by the closest gun store. And that's basically what happened to me. I went to my gun store and they gave me the smallest handgun you ever saw. And luckily I wasn't, I'm a strong soul, so it didn't deter me, which was nice. But if I wasn't such a strong soul, it probably would have taken me out of the sport completely. And that would have been my first taste of like really shooting, Talking
to these other ladies, it's funny how you guys can be in different areas and have such a similar story about, a woman. Well, it's like almost like a bad joke. A woman walks into a gun store, is how it starts. And she gets terrible advice on what gun to buy in the first place. Usually it's, oh, sweetheart, pat you on the head. Here's your 22, 6-shot revolver because that's all you can handle. Training, you're just treated differently during the trainings, which is why it's so critical that people like you, especially in places like New York and like Wendy Hoffman in California, are taking responsibility for making sure there is quality training out there for female self-defenders. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we part ways?
Yes, actually. Right before, when I do my orientation with my women, I really stress the fact that they need to walk into a gun store informed. Like, don't walk, like, who goes to Honda and says, I want a Honda? Nobody. They say they want a Honda Civic. The ES series or whatever. I'm making it up. I have no idea if there's an ES series. But the point is that if you walk into a gun store and you say, tell me what you think is best for me, you're just setting yourself up for failure right there. They're going to sell you whatever's going to be discontinued next week. And that literally happened to me. So it's really important that even when you go to the gun store, that you have proper muzzle etiquette, proper trigger discipline, and, you're really aware of what you're doing with that firearm, because they will take that and use it against you like you don't know anything. So if you come in there with the right, you're handling the gun properly, you're speaking the right speak, you're not calling a magazine a clip, and if you come in like that, your respect as a woman just goes up. But the second you mess up, bam, it plummets, and it's very hard to recover from that. So try to keep, and I hate to say this, but women have to work 1.5 times more than any men. And that is so true, that we have to be on our game for every word that comes out of our mouth. So it gets taken seriously and it gets held against you. So that's my last thing I would like to say to part our ways, that, just be careful before you go into a gun store, that you know what you're looking for.
So the order is go find a qualified trainer, get your learn on about the guns and how to handle them, and then go select a gun with an informed decision.
Exactly. 100%. Mike, you nailed it.
Lisa, that's excellent advice. I want to thank you so much for all you're doing out there behind enemy lines in New York State. I want to thank you for being on the show, and thanks for being a good friend, and I hope to talk to you again soon, Lisa.
Thanks, buddy. Miss you. Can't wait to see you again sometime, hopefully.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
With us on the line now is my good friend, Carrie Dudenhofer. Yes, that is her real last name. Although she might tell you the story about when she met her future husband and telling him she didn't believe that was his last name, but that's a story for another time. Carrie is the owner and lead trainer at carrieconcealed.com, and Carrie is spelled Kaery, carrieconcealed.com. She is the training department coordinator here at Active Self Protection. So, Carrie, to prep for this show, I was looking at your website and all of your training certs, and I was going to list them, a few of them, but I realized all of them were so impressive I couldn't pick a few of them. And if I listed them all, we would be here for 4.5 hours. So let me start
sweet.
by welcoming you to the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
And so what got you started in self-defense? I know you're a loving wife and a loving mother of like 14 kids. And so
Exactly.
First of all, tell us about your lovely family. You have how many kids?
Yeah. So I'm a wife of one, and we've been married for almost 28 years now. And actually, not yet 28. See, I forget that sometimes. He remembers, I don't. Anyway, we have 7 children, 23 down to 8. And they're great kids, and I'm grateful. We'd like to say that we have 3 domestics and 4 imports.
4 imports? From where are they imported?
Well, one import we imported from China, although we went there to get her and brought her back with us. And then the last 3 were a buy one, get 2 free deal out of Detroit, Michigan. They're a sibling group.
You have a beautiful home there. I just got to see that a few minutes ago. I'm sorry the audience can't see it. And so you have a beautiful home and a beautiful family to protect. But of course, a lot of people would just think, well, I mean, you have a man, you have a husband there. He should be protecting you. And we know now that's not really reality. Of course, he would love to be there 24/7, standing watch over everybody, but he can't. So what sparked your interest in becoming a self-defender?
It's something that I've always kind of been aware of as my responsibility. I grew up in a law enforcement family, lived in a rural eastern Washington county, and the county seat was an hour and a half away. So if you needed help, depended on where the one deputy that was on duty was at, but he would get there as quickly as he could. And so I just remember having that idea that we needed to be prepared to take care of ourselves. And that kind of carried into adulthood. My plan always was to run, though, if something were happening. And for some reason, I foolishly thought that I'd be able to run away from anything. And then an incident happened in our area in 2005, which coincided with the time that I could no longer, the time in my life when I could no longer pick up my 2 oldest children and my newborn child and run. Although I used to practice with the 2 older ones, picking them up and running. That incident helped me realize that there really was no one that could be there all the time to protect me except me. And since I was the one that was with my kids most of the time, it was really my responsibility. And so the horrific incident that happened, I won't go into all the details, but it was a family that was asleep in their home in a rural area like we live. An aggressor broke into their home and bludgeoned to death the mother and father and 13-year-old son, and took the 9-year-old and 7-year-old and abducted them for a period of time. And it was just an awful situation. But it made me realize that even in the place I felt the safest, that I might not be 100% safe there. So we needed to have some layers of protection around us, so we would have warnings and know that people were coming, and then be prepared if, God forbid, something did happen. Not that we live in a state of fear, because we don't. I actually am, more relaxed now, more aware, but more relaxed than I think I probably ever have been, at least in those younger days.
A couple of points from what you just said. Once you are prepared and you're consciously or unconsciously competent at matters related to self-defense, you can be more relaxed because you know you have a plan and you have training, and you're not just sort of having this nebulous hope that hopefully I can run away, or hopefully I can pick up this gun I've never picked up before and I'll know how to use it, And the other thing, I talked to Stephen Williford, the hero of Sutherland Springs, the other day.
Yeah.
And I think this applies to you. I think people live in a nice, beautiful rural area like you do, and they think, oh, it's not going to happen here. That happens in New York or Chicago, or, but it did happen there. I think you told me you had a conversation with a family friend who was law enforcement, and he gave you some information that was even more chilling.
Yeah. So that was enough to really get me kickstarted. And about a year after that incident happened, a dear friend of ours who was on the local police department in a large city area, asked me, hey, don't you and your kids do kinder music a couple times a week? And I said, oh, yeah. And he said, I just thought you might like to know, because I had conversations with him about the realization that I had. He said, I thought you'd just like to know that we have GPS data from the aggressor's vehicle that we've kind of studied. And he said the individual spent a considerable amount of time over a 3-week period of time in that exact block where our Kinder Music building was. And so I was there twice a week with my then 4-year-old and 2-year-old. I felt as safe as I could possibly feel there. And that has had a lasting impact, because not that I was necessarily unsafe or that we were targeted, because we weren't, but it made me realize that I could be in the presence of evil or just feet away from evil and not even know it and not be prepared to protect myself, nor would my children have been prepared to. Those aren't things that we'd really spent a lot of time talking about. Now you ask my kids, and we go to a movie, and there's a lot of us, right? So we usually have to sit in 2 rows, but a big kid takes responsibility for a little kid. And I just say, where are the exits? And they point out where the exits are. And the little kid knows to wait for the big kid to grab them. And away we go. So it's kind of neat to have that outlook as a family. I do ask my kids, people say, aren't your kids paranoid? Actually, they're not paranoid at all. They feel comfortable and confident knowing that they'll, that they're okay. They just need to keep an eye out, and mom and dad are there to help. So
absolutely. I think there's a ton of people listening to this maybe for the first time who are like, who are these weirdo, paranoid, crazy people? When you when you have a friend since high school and you haven't seen him for a few years, and then they find out you carry a gun, and they're like, whoa, that seems so foreign, so alien to them. But I think if more people had this mindset, which is kind of the point of the show, hopefully, is to give people this mindset. They wouldn't look at it as some kind of crazy, paranoid, delusional state to live in, just a good way to live. And like I said before, you said you've never felt more comfortable than you felt at Kinder Music. I bet that's not true anymore. I bet you feel more comfortable, more confident now in public places and even at home.
I was foolishly comfortable at Kinder Music, thinking that, we're all safe together, and we're all of us mommies and our kids are all in one little room together and everything's safe. When, yes, we were safe, but we also may not have been either. And not that I would ever go looking for trouble or would ever want trouble to happen, because that's the last thing I would want. I just want to be prepared to do my best if, God forbid, it did ever happen.
After this incident, you got all this other unfortunate information from the family friend who was in law enforcement. So where did you go from there? Because I think a lot of people were like, I know what I'll do. I'll take jujitsu or I'll take karate. Those things are fine. Or I'll go buy a gun and not train with it. I'll just have a gun like a magic talisman. By the way, that's locked up so deep at home that I could never get to it if I needed it.
Right.
So what was your next step, and how did that progress? And then how did you progress into deciding to want to instruct other people?
Okay, great. I won't go into the long details because it could take a while, but I'll just do briefly.
Sure.
There wasn't any training available in my area at that time. There was no range or at least none that I was aware of, and I did quite a bit of looking. So any training was military and law enforcement. And to me, that seemed confusing to me at the time, that civilian learning to protect themselves could be similar to military law enforcement, because the mission and equipment is so different. Law enforcement, they're running to the sounds of gunfire, and bless them for doing that. As a civilian, I'm running away, and they're wearing a firearm outside for, visible. I would not be doing that. I would be doing the opposite. So it took me a while to find a place that I could train. And it was my dad's the one that really encouraged me. He said, if you're going to train, I would encourage you to train with the best of the best, and you're going to spend about the same, whether you go to, Portland or to, Phoenix. And so here's a list of guys that I've been reading for a while, and I would encourage you to seek out training with them. So that's what I did. And that just led to people asking me, where I was going, or they'd hear I was going to be out of town for a little while. And they would ask what I was doing. And depending on who it was, I would share, and then, oh man, yeah, I've wondered too. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And so I just started sharing with my friends, and they would bring their friends, and, can I bring my mom also? And then friends in law enforcement would say, man, can you please do a class for our wives? We'll set it up. You can use, academy space. Just please do a class for our wives. So that's really how it all started, is people asking for help. And I was happy to do it. I really do enjoy teaching and helping people take responsibility for themselves and get good answers. The problem is, I think we live in a time now where there's more misinformation out there than accurate information. And so where can people go to get accurate information? And not that I'm the one that's come up with this. Anybody in the firearm world will tell you that, what they've learned from other people is what they're sharing.
Sure. I think let me point one thing out. I love being part of the active self-protection family, because there's people like you, people like John, Neil and Steph. This guy I talked to now on the podcast, the investigative journalist, Steve Gatowski. And there's two common threads I want to point out. One is that sane, sober, moral, prudent, all these things aren't just buzzwords around here. We surround ourselves with competent, level-headed, down-to-earth people who are not, they're not blowing their own horn. They're just, humble people that are trying to get good information out to people who need it, because there's so much noise out there in this space right now. And just not enough people just trying to give people good information. I think some of that noise is well-intentioned. I think people mean well, but they're giving out bad information. The other common thread that the other ladies that I spoke with today, and it's not specific to ladies per se, but just that being the first person in your orbit to become aware of the need to protect yourself, aware of the need that your husband or the police or whomever can't be around all the time to protect you. So you got to take agency over your own self-defense, and you take that interest and you start to get training, and you become the expert that people reach out to. You're the only person they know that's in this space. And they're like, hey, I know Carrie Dudenhofer knows about this. I think I want to get a gun. Hey, Carrie, what should I do? And you prepared yourself unwittingly, probably at first, to be that person, to be the person in their orbit they can go to. Carrie, I want to thank you so much for being on today. This has been great. And hopefully, I know this will air afterwards, but I will see you in a few days in Kansas at the ASP National Conference. I'm looking forward to that. And kiss your kids, hug your husband for me. And thanks again for being on.
I'll do it. Thank you, Mr. Mike.
Hey friends, this is John Correa. If you like the podcast, if it is bringing you value, do me a favor. Just rate the podcast and leave us a rating and a review. It really helps us out.
Okay, folks, it's that time of the week again for the Gatowski Files. With us, Steve Gatowski, founder of TheReload.com, host of the Weekly Reload podcast. This week, we have a really interesting story. I think really interesting. My dad would call it the old okey doke, the old slap and tickle, if you will. There's a group out in Virginia that is putting up ads against. So it's a sort of a liberal Democrat progressive group putting up ads against the candidate Youngkin, who's running for governor in Virginia, and the ads are saying he's just not tough enough to fight for the Second Amendment, which seems a little odd. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
You just got back from vacation. You look tan and rested. And I'm kidding. You looked really tired.
Yeah. No, it was a good vacation though, with my family down at the Delaware shore. So
awesome.
So that was pleasant. But yeah, this story's an interesting one. The thing about it is that they don't identify themselves as a liberal group, right? They're putting out ads about how the Republican nominee there, Glenn Youngkin, is too liberal on guns, basically, is the what they're saying. I mean, they're bringing up this point about how he hasn't been endorsed by the NRA or the local gun rights group, the VCDL, and they're saying like, oh, Trump was endorsed by the NRA, but Glenn Youngkin's not. But when you look at who the group is, or look into how it was founded and how it operates, it becomes clear that they're not like some sort of pro-gun group,
right?
That they're a cynical shadow group that was formed by progressive entities somewhere. Like it's a super PAC, so we don't know yet who their donors were or who runs them necessarily, because the filing, they have to file papers eventually, but they don't have to do it right away. And they were just formed in July,
right? So
they just popped up, and but there are some key signs to know that this group is not a legitimate pro-gun group. There's the fact that they were founded by a consulting firm that exclusively works with Democrats and progressive causes.
Before we got on the air, we were talking, and folks, we're not naive. He and I have been following politics since the 90s, and we both know that there are these sorts of groups on both sides of the aisle. So the reason this story is germane to us is because it involves your gun rights. So
yeah, and it's not unheard of for this tactic to be used, even with these sort of pop-up ostensibly pro-gun groups that attack the Republican candidates for not being pro-gun enough in some races. This has happened a number of times in the past, but it's just interesting to see it done, and it's important for people to understand what's happening, how it's going on, because it's legit. You can legitimately talk about Glenn Youngkin and whether he hasn't been endorsed by the NRA or VCDL because he hasn't filled out their their surveys that they sent out to candidates, so they haven't endorsed him. Now he's taken positions that are, felt well more pro-gun than Terry McAuliffe, of course. Terry McAuliffe is Democrat, former governor of Virginia, who has endorsed things like an assault weapons ban, which Youngkin opposes. He's supported the local gun restrictions bill that passed last year that Youngkin also opposes. So there's a fairly clear contrast on the issues. But it's the real issue here is that somebody is trying to mislead people, and they're targeting specific areas of Virginia that are heavily Republican, and with the idea being that perhaps they will get people to not come out to vote for Glenn Youngkin.
If you're listening to this show, odds are you're smart enough to see through these kinds of ads. But every campaign cycle they come around, it's the ominous voice. We can't trust Glenn Youngkin on guns. He should tell us the truth about where he stands. Well, first of all, who are we, right? I would like to think that the average voter on either side of the aisle could see through that. But the fact is these ads actually work. They're actually effective.
Sure, they can be. And look, that they're using a sort of a basis of a legitimate point to try and launch this campaign. Now, clearly, I think the people who are putting the money behind these ads don't actually view Glenn Youngkin not being endorsed by the NRA or VCDL as an issue. That's where the problem comes in. It's like there's a famous linebacker in the NFL. He's a big prospect in college in the 80s, Brian Bosworth, right? Okay. And he came out and he tried to stir up a lot of controversy around himself and hype himself up. He ended up being a bust, but he was able to create this rivalry with the Broncos, where he would attack like John Elway, and he made all these comments in the media. And then during the game, he ended up selling anti-Bosworth shirts, sold thousands of them to people who didn't know that that the money was going to go to Brian Bosworth. It's a similar idea here of like, maybe there's some legitimate point at the core of this, but it's very unlikely that the people who created this group that are running these ads actually believes in it. And that's what the problem is. It's not, you can question Glenn Youngkin and his decision not to fill out the surveys. In fact, I did for my piece, right? I asked them why they didn't. And frankly, his response is a bit weak. He said, basically they're a waste of time. This is kind of the line that his campaign gave me. But again, the contrast on the issues is pretty clear between McAuliffe and Youngkin in that race. And this group, the interesting thing about them is that they're probably not telling the truth about what they believe.
I think on election year, I said before, there's way too many political ads. It becomes a complete annoyance to the point where you can't watch broadcast television. So could you explain to the folks how it works? I think you know this. The Democrat Party, the Republican Party in state of Virginia, let's say, they want to put their ads and get their ads in front of the right people. So does an ad just go on TV, quote unquote, and it's just everyone sees it? Or do they target certain ads to certain areas?
Oh, they definitely target certain ads to certain areas, and they'll buy based off of the media market, right? Like when you watch a football game or something on your TV at home, you get local ads from businesses that are just in your area. And obviously not everyone in the country is getting that ad for the local heating and air conditioning repair guy, right? It's a similar thing with political ads. Although in this case, these ads are social ads. So they're even more targeted. Like I said earlier, they've specifically targeted only the counties where Republicans are in the large majority in Virginia. So the more rural areas of Virginia. And the idea is clearly that they're trying to depress that vote. They're trying to make people think, oh, this guy's not worth supporting. Now, again, someone could come to that conclusion on their own because he doesn't think it's worth the time to fill out the surveys from these gun rights groups. That could be a legitimate question about, what he's doing with his campaign. But the problem, again, is that this group is disingenuous about raising this issue because, like, for instance, they're using Act Blue as their fundraising apparatus, and Act Blue is created specifically to help Democratic campaigns and progressive issues. In fact, Terry McAuliffe himself, the Democratic candidate, is also using Act Blue
Right.
to raise his money. Now, the Republicans have a similar thing on their side called Win Red, but that gives you, it's just another point that tells you that this group is not likely to be actually run by pro-gun people. And in fact, their website is basically nothing. It's just a donate button that goes to the Act Blue fundraiser. There's no information on who runs the group. It's kind of just a pass-through entity to use this cynical tactic that, again, it's not the first time this has happened, but it's something that people should be aware of.
Right. And we're talking about it here strictly because it relates to Second Amendment issues. So, folks, if you're listening to us week by week and you're only hearing sort of negative things about Democrats or liberals or whatever, listen, if you have an issue, you find a right-wing or Republican politician who's doing something to harm the Second Amendment or your rights, absolutely let me or Stephen know. We'll go after that person 100%. That we're one issue people here on this show. I also noticed they spent how much on these ads so far?
They spent about $25,000 at least. They've reached upwards of 5 million impressions at this point. So it's not the biggest ad buy in the world. This is not the main tactic for winning this race, I would say, in Virginia, but it's just something that's more interesting. Like, obviously they're spending lots of money. I live in Virginia, so I see the ads from Youngkin and McAuliffe all the time. In fact, McAuliffe, interestingly, put out his own ad about Youngkin's gun policies, where he essentially says he's too far to the right on guns. So it's kind of ironic that the campaign is running ads on the surface from the campaign that say this guy's too conservative on guns. And at the same time, somebody is running ads saying he's too weak on guns that clearly is aligned with the interests of the McAuliffe campaign, not necessarily the campaign itself is not necessarily doing this. But I think it's fairly clear from the signals and the things that we talked about here, the signs, that they are people who actually want McAuliffe to be elected, because they're trying to, again, they're only running these ads in Republican areas, and they're ads that are going to negatively affect the Republican voters' thoughts about Youngkin and perhaps keep them from going out to vote, which would be perhaps enough to turn the tide of the race, because this is going to be a fairly close race from what the polling indicates. I mean, the Youngkin's within a couple points of McAuliffe in all the recent polling there. And the Virginia has an off-year election, right? This is election in 2021 instead of 2022. And it tends to be that the party out of power, so the Republicans in this case, because President Biden is a Democrat, obviously, they tend to do better in the Virginia governor election. So there's some things in favor of Youngkin winning, or at least this being a very close race. And something, even though this is a relatively small amount of money, it's smartly targeted. It could have the kind of impact that keeps the race much closer, or even turns it slightly towards McAuliffe.
I hate to have to believe it, but I believe it. There are people who make their decisions on who to vote for based on celebrities on Twitter, based on a 30-second attack ad, and on a yard, how many yard signs they see with a certain last name on them. And it's a preposterous way to be, but unfortunately, like you said, $25,000 politically, that's pocket change, and that got 5 million impressions in a race where there's a 1 or 2 or 3% margin, for victory. That makes a difference. So even just a fraction of those people having their minds changed or getting depressed and not voting at all, that makes a difference in an election.
Yeah, it absolutely can.
If you are lamenting the lack of down the middle, sane, sober, moral, prudent, as we like to say, reporting on the Second Amendment, you got to go over to The Reload, thereload.com. You got to sign up. You got to give this man some money so he can continue doing what he's doing. You got to check out the Weekly Reload podcast. In fact, I think you just had one come out with Wendy Hoffman. Is that correct?
That's right. San Diego County gun owners. It's a very interesting look at the sort of local level of gun activism and how they've been able to have success even in a place like California.
Right. You just heard a little bit from her. If you want more in depth on her, go check her out, and Stephen on the Weekly Reload podcast. Stephen, thank you so much for making time.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Take care, bud.